She was born broken, and the wolf inside her never woke. The silver chain around her neck was lighter than the shame. 17 years old, and Mira had never felt the burn of transformation, never tasted the wild copper of her own blood, never heard the song that connected every Omega to the pack's heartbeat. Instead, she existed in the margins of Clearwater Pack, human, useless, invisible. The fang hanging from that chain wasn't hers. It belonged to her father, Alpha Henrik, who'd commissioned it from the silversmith the day she was born. A promise once. Now it was a tombstone. She knelt in the snow outside the compound walls, her fingers, purely human fingers, pressing into the drift. The December night was absolute. No moon silver, no starlight, just the weight of cold and the distant sound of her siblings howling in the clearing beyond the fence. They were transforming. She could feel the vibration of their bones shifting through the earth, but her own skeleton remained locked in this fragile, shameful human form. Still here? Mira didn't turn. She knew that voice, Garrett, Beta's son, the one who'd offered to help her shift 3 times before finally stopping. The pity in his tone had been worse than cruelty. The Alpha wants the compound cleared for the blood moon ritual, he continued. That means you. You're not Pack. You know the law. Mira did know, law and bloodline and destiny, all written in the language of the wolf, and she spoke none of it. She stood without answering, brushing snow from her jeans. The fang caught the distant torchlight as she moved, casting a thin, trembling shadow. She'd stopped wearing it inside the compound months ago, but tonight she'd fastened it around her neck like armor, like a last word. "Where will you go?" Garrett asked, and there was something almost sad in the question. Does it matter? The winter forest beyond Clearwater territory was a dark mouth. Mira had never ventured past the northern ridge, no need. A shifter without a wolf had nowhere to belong, but a human girl with a dead father's fang and nothing to lose. She could go anywhere. She could disappear so completely that even the memory of her inadequacy would freeze solid. She walked past Garrett without waiting for an answer. Her single backpack, containing 2 sweaters, a knife, her grandmother's journal, and her father's old leather jacket, was already packed and hidden at the forest's edge. She'd known this day was coming since her 16th birthday, when the others had stopped pretending that maybe, eventually, she'd shift. The snow crunched under her boots. Each step took her farther from the compound, from the firelight, from the smell of pack safety and belonging. Behind her, she heard Garrett's disappointed sigh, and then the sound of the gate closing. She was human. She was alone. She was free. But freedom, she would learn, was just another word for exile, and exile was where the real story began. 3 days of walking. 3 nights of sleeping in the hollow of an oak tree, her father's jacket wrapped tight, the silver fang pressed against her collarbone like a heartbeat. Mira had burned through her food on the first day and was now drinking snowmelt and eating pine nuts, moving north because south meant other packs, and north meant nothing but wilderness and wind. The blizzard found her on the 4th night. She didn't see it coming, just felt the temperature drop as if the world had decided to hold its breath. The snow came sideways, erasing the forest in white fury. Mira pushed forward, her human lungs burning, her human eyes nearly frozen shut. She had no wolf senses to guide her, no pack connection to call her home. She had only stubbornness and the faint memory of her grandmother's voice. "Walk toward the fire, child. Always toward the fire." But there was no fire, only white. She fell into a ravine she didn't see, tumbling down an embankment and landing hard against stone. Pain bloomed in her ribs. She lay in the snow, breathing in small, careful gasps, and waited for the hypothermia to do its work. It seemed fitting, somehow. Human enough to freeze, Omega enough to die alone. That's when she heard it. A roar that wasn't wind, a sound so deep it vibrated through the stone beneath her body, through her bones, through the silver fang at her throat. Mira opened her eyes. Through the white chaos, she saw movement, massive, burning gold. A wolf. No, not a wolf. Something else entirely. Something that made her primitive human brain scream that she was looking at death itself. The creature was enormous, with fur the color of storm clouds and blood. Its left eye was scarred shut, and fresh blood ran down its shoulder in dark rivulets, freezing in the bitter wind. As it moved closer, Mira realized it was limping, favoring its right leg, and something in its movement spoke of pain so profound that even through her terror, she felt it. It was dying. The creature, the Lycan, she understood with sudden, terrifying clarity, stopped a few meters from her. Its one open eye, burning amber and ancient, fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to scream. It huffed, breath steaming in the blizzard, and she heard something beneath the growl. A question, recognition. Mira should have run. Her human instincts screamed at her to move, to flee, to fight. Instead, she stayed still, her hand moving slowly to the silver fang at her throat. She didn't know why. The Lycan limped closer, each movement a study in controlled agony. Its massive head lowered toward her, and Mira could smell it now. Ancient forests, cold iron, wildfire, and something else. Something wounded and searching. The creature's hot breath touched her face, melting the frost on her cheeks. And in that moment, suspended between death and something stranger, Mira understood. This beast had been cast out too. Not from a pack, perhaps, but from something. From hope. From mercy. From the belief that he could ever be anything but a weapon. The Lycan's single eye held hers, and she saw in it the mirror of her own rejection. "Stay," she whispered, though she didn't know to whom, herself or the dying god thing before her. "Please just stay." The creature collapsed into the snow beside her, and for the first time in her 17 years of human, broken, shameful life, Mira felt something like belonging. The cave was ancient, its mouth opening like a cathedral toward the storm-darkened sky. Mira dragged the Lycan inside, using both hands wrapped around the thick fur of its haunches, her muscles screaming, her breath ragged. The creature was barely conscious, its massive body going through the motions of movement without seeming to understand them. She'd half-walked, half-crawled alongside it for an hour, following some instinct that screamed survival, until the mountain itself had opened and offered shelter. Inside, it was warmer. Not warm, the cold still bit at exposed skin, but warmer than the open blizzard, and that was enough. Mira collapsed beside the Lycan, both of them breathing hard. The beast's sides heaved with effort, and she could see clearly now in the dim gray light filtering through the cave entrance that the wound on its shoulder was catastrophic. Not just a scratch or a battle wound. This was something deliberate, something that spoke of an attempt to kill. "You're a king," she said aloud, the words surprising her. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. There was something in the bearing of him, even broken and bleeding out on stone. A Lycan king, and they tried to murder you. The creature's amber eye flickered toward her, and she thought she saw recognition flicker there. Understanding. Mira spent the next hours doing what she could. She used her father's knife to cut strips from her own clothes, fashioning a crude bandage. The water from the cave's underground stream was freezing, but she soaked the cloth and cleaned the wound as gently as she could manage, her human hands steady despite her racing heart. She'd read about this in her grandmother's journal, the old ways of healing, when wolves still trusted humans, when the divide hadn't existed. "I'm Mira," she said, working. "I know you probably don't care. I know you're going to die and I'm useless. And this doesn't matter. But I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm 17. I can't shift. My pack threw me out tonight because I'm a failure. And I was planning to freeze to death in a blizzard, which I suppose I'm doing, just slower. So we're both dying. At least we're not doing it alone." The Lycan's breathing had slowed, become more even. Whether from blood loss or fever or the simple acceptance of the end, Mira didn't know, but he seemed less frantic, calmer. She wrapped herself in her father's jacket and lay beside the massive creature, her small human back against his warm flank. The silver fang at her throat caught the faint light and threw it back in fragmented stars. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside the mountain's embrace, something shifted. Not transformation. Something else. Something that felt impossibly like sanctuary. "Thank you," the Lycan growled, the first sound it had made beyond pain sounds. A voice like boulders rolling through ancient canyons, rough with disuse and suffering. "For not running." Mira's eyes widened, but before she could respond, she felt the warmth of his body wrap around her, protective and absolute. And she understood. Kings could bleed too, and maybe, sometimes, they needed saving by the ones the world had already discarded. In the darkness of the cave, with her hand resting on the Lycan's warm fur and the silver fang between them like a bridge between two broken souls, Mira heard the end of the blizzard. And with it came the strange certainty that she'd been wandering toward this cave her entire life. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence. Tell us where in the world you're hearing this, and at what hour of the night this story finds you. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moment they reach you. He didn't speak much those first days. The fever came on the third night, and Mira sat vigil through it, bathing his burning body with cold water from the stream, whispering things she couldn't quite remember afterward. Her grandmother's prayers in languages that didn't have names, songs her father used to hum, promises she had no right to make. On the 6th day, the fever broke. "Kyle," he said, his voice clearer now, though still raw as broken glass. "My name is Kale, and you should have let me die." Mira was gathering firewood at the cave's mouth. She turned, the branches falling from her arms. "Why would I do that?" "Because what I am is a curse to everything it touches." His amber eye, the only one he could open, tracked her movement. In the pale northern light, she could see more of him now. Scars that spoke of centuries, a body carved from violence and duty. "I am Lycan King of the Northern Territories, and I was brought down by my own bloodline." She returned to the fire she'd been maintaining, adding kindling. They'd established a rhythm these past days. She moved, he watched. She spoke, he listened. She healed, he accepted. It was the closest thing to understanding two broken creatures could manage. "Tell me," she said. And he did. Kyle was not born this way, the half-man, half-beast form that now defined him. He was once fully Lycan, a pure creature of transformation and ancient power. But 30 years ago, he'd chosen mercy over war. A human village caught between Lycan and pack warfare, he'd protected them instead of conquering them. The cost of that choice had been his throne, his family's approval, and finally, his pure form. A blood curse placed by his own brother, designed to trap him between wolf and human, neither and both, forever. "They called me weak," Kale said, and the word tasted like ash. "For choosing human lives over Lycan supremacy. So, my brother marked me, made me this. Neither beast nor man, neither king nor subject. And last week, he decided even that wasn't punishment enough. He sent assassins, professional ones. They nearly succeeded." Mira listened, and as she did, something crystallized inside her. A recognition that transcended pack law or wolf blood or the hierarchy that had rejected them both. "You were punished for mercy," she said quietly. "I was rejected for being human. We're on opposite sides of the same coin." Kale was silent for a long moment. Then, "What are you, Mira? I can smell your blood. It's not purely human, but I can't. I can't sense the wolf. Not like I should." This was the question she'd been dreading. "I'm what happens when an alpha and a human woman have a child who doesn't fit either world. I should have shifted at puberty like any omega. Instead, I stayed human. The pack calls it a genetic defect, a failure. My father died when I was 5, so I never got to ask him what he thought it meant. She pulled the silver fang from her neck and held it up. He made this when I was born. Maybe he knew I'd never shift. Maybe he loved me anyway. I'll never know. Kael reached out, a movement that clearly cost him, and his massive hand, still half-clawed despite being in his more humanoid form, gently closed around the fang. He didn't take it, just held it between them. "A pathfinder," he said suddenly, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. "Mira, I think you're a pathfinder." "What's that?" "An ancient gift, rarer than pure Lycan, a soul that exists between worlds and can navigate them all. My grandmother's grandmother was one. She could speak to wolves and humans and creatures of magic as equals. She could heal wounds that shouldn't be healable." He looked at her, really looked at her. She could see the truth beneath all the lies we tell ourselves about power and hierarchy. Mira felt something crack open inside her chest. Not pain this time. Something else. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding that the world that rejected her had been wrong. Not incomplete. Not broken. Different. "If you're right," she said slowly, "then I'm not useless." "You're not," Kyle agreed. His hand released the fang but stayed close, the heat of him reaching across the distance between them. "You're the only thing that could save me from the curse. The only thing that could bridge what I've become." And in the firelight of the cave, with the northern wind singing outside and the silver fang burning between them like a star, Mira understood her destiny was not to be what her pack wanted. It was to be herself, fully, for the first time in her broken, beautiful life. Kyle could walk by the 10th day. His shoulder, bandaged with strips of Mira's clothes and treated with poultices she made from cave moss and herbs from her grandmother's journal, had closed enough that infection was no longer the immediate threat. But infection wasn't what Kyle feared. "They'll be tracking me," he said one evening as they sat at the cave mouth, watching the northern lights spiral across the sky like ghosts dancing. "My brother won't accept failure. He'll send more assassins, better ones." "Then we leave," Mira said. It was simple in her mind. Run. Find somewhere else. Become nothing but legends whispered about. It's not that simple. Kyle's single eye was fixed on the horizon, seeing threats Mira couldn't perceive. "I'm still bound to my territory by blood oath. I can't leave without triggering a succession war. My brother will use my absence as proof that I've abdicated. He'll consolidate power, destroy the laws I've spent centuries building, and plunge the northern territories into chaos." "So you're trapped," Mira said, understanding. "Just like I was trapped in a pack that didn't want me." "No." Kael turned to her, and in his scarred face, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not the wounded king, not the cursed beast. Just a man, if you could call him that, who was about to ask something impossible. "I'm trapped unless I claim what was mine, unless I face my brother and the blood court and prove I'm still king, unless I show them that a curse doesn't diminish me, that choosing mercy over dominance is strength, not weakness." Mira's breath caught. "You're going to challenge him. We're going to challenge him. Kael, your gift, Mira. A pathfinder can navigate courts of magic the way others navigate forests. You can see through blood magic, illusions, curses. You can testify to my truth in a way no one else can." He reached for her hand, his claws careful against her skin. "I need you, not as a healer, as a witness, as proof that transformation isn't corruption, that broken things can become beautiful." The wind rose, carrying the scent of snow and distant fire. Mira thought of the pack that had exiled her, thought of 17 years of shame and silence, thought of her father's fang heavy around her neck. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I can never go back. Not to Clearwater, not to anything." "No," Kael agreed, "but you were never meant to. Pathfinders are meant to walk between worlds, to belong nowhere so they can belong everywhere. That's your curse and your gift. Mira looked at the Lycan king, broken, scarred, marked by a terrible mercy, and she understood that they were the same after all. Both rejected, both marked by forces beyond their control, both standing at the edge of a choice that would reshape everything. She squeezed his clawed hand. Then let's teach them what it means to be strong enough to forgive. Outside the cave, the northern lights turned blood red, and somewhere in the distant mountains, Kale's brother opened his eyes and smiled, knowing his prey had moved at last. They moved through the winter landscape like ghosts, Kale forcing his still healing body to maintain the grueling pace while Mira navigated using instincts she didn't know she possessed. Her Pathfinder gift manifested slowly, a tingling in her skin that warned of dangerous ground, a sense of direction that pulled her towards safety, an ability to read the intentions of creatures they encountered. A snow bear let them pass. A pack of winter wolves lowered their heads in acknowledgement. The journey should have taken 3 weeks. They covered it in 10 days. Kale's fortress sat at the heart of the northern mountains, a structure that seemed carved from the stone itself, all sharp angles and ancient power. As they approached the gates, Mira felt the weight of blood magic pressing against her skin like a physical thing. This was a place where old rules held sway, where might and lineage and supernatural strength determined worth, where human girls with silver fangs had no place. "They'll challenge you," Kyle said as they climbed the final slope. His voice was stronger now, but pain still threaded through it. "My brother's supporters will demand trials, tests. They'll try to prove you're corrupting me, using dark magic to enslave me." "What will I say?" Mira asked. "The truth. Pathfinders can't lie. It's woven into their nature. The Blood Court knows this. Your testimony will carry more weight than any number of warriors." The gates opened as they approached, not in greeting, but in a display of power. Kyle's brother stood in the courtyard beyond, golden where Kale was silver, unmarked where Kale was scarred. He was beautiful in the way of weapons, beautiful and terrible. "Brother," he said, his voice smooth as honey and sharp as ice. "You've brought a human whore to my gates. How perfectly fitting. The cursed king and his cursed consort." Kale stepped forward, but Mira caught his arm. She felt the rage trembling through his body, the beast straining against the man. But she also felt something else. Fear. Not of his brother's strength, but of his words, of the doubt they were meant to plant. She released him and walked to the center of the courtyard, her small human figure almost comical against the massive stone. The silver fang at her neck caught the pale sunlight and threw it back at them all like accusation. "I'm Mira," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "And I'm here to tell you the truth about your brother." Kale's brother laughed. "A pathfinder? How unexpected. And completely useless, I'm afraid. Because the truth, girl, is that weakness is a disease, and your king is infected." "Then prove it," Mira challenged. "Let's go to the Blood Court. Let's see if your truth stands up to judgment. Like if you believe rejection can become destiny. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen." The Blood Court convened at midnight beneath the Mountain of Witnesses, a vast cavern where the ancestors of the Lycan bloodline were said to watch from the stone itself. The walls breathed with ancient power, carved in spirals and symbols that predated human language. Mira could feel them, not as spirits exactly, but as presences, like weight pressing against her skin, like expectation, like the accumulated judgment of centuries pressing down from every shadow. The cavern floor was a vast, circular arena, and at its center, a pool of liquid silver. Blood magic so old it had crystallized into something between water and metal. The air tasted of copper and ozone. Kyle stood to her left. his beast form flickering beneath his skin with the effort of controlling it. She could feel the rage trembling through his body, the wolf straining against the man, desperate to emerge and fight. But she also felt something else moving beneath the rage. Fear, not of his brother's strength, but of his words, of the doubt they were meant to plant like poison seeds in the minds of those who watched. His brother stood across the chamber, flanked by warriors with eyes like ice, creatures who had never questioned hierarchy, never known rejection, never learned that mercy could be anything but weakness. The brother's form was perfect in its predatory beauty, golden fur, unmarked by scar or curse, radiating the kind of power that came from never having been tested. Between them, the blood judges occupied thrones of blackened stone, ancient creatures neither fully wolf nor fully human, existing in the liminal space where law was written in ichor and bone. There were 7 of them, and their eyes burned with the weight of centuries. They had judged thousands of challenges. They had seen kingdoms rise and fall. They were the arbiters of what was true and what was lie in the supernatural hierarchy. "The curse is weakness," Kyle's brother proclaimed, his voice echoing through the chamber with deliberate power. It made him pathetic, made him choose human lives over his own people's supremacy. "I merely completed what nature had already begun. A Lycan king who cares more for mortals than for his own bloodline is no king at all. I am offering you a choice. Embrace the strength I represent or follow my brother into extinction." The warriors behind him roared approval, and the sound shook loose stone from the ceiling. Mira felt dust fall into her hair, and she understood that this wasn't just a trial. This was theater designed to overwhelm, to intimidate, to establish dominance before the actual judgment even began. She stepped forward before Kale could respond, and felt his hand reach out to stop her. She squeezed his fingers briefly, a promise, and moved into the center of the arena. "He chose mercy," Mira said, her voice small in the vast chamber, but steady, clear, absolutely certain. "And it nearly cost him his life. That's not weakness. That's the purest form of courage." "You're biased," the brother spat, his lip curling to reveal fangs that glinted in the magic light. "You're in love with him. It clouds your Pathfinder's sight. How convenient for his defense that he's brought a lover to testify on his behalf. Next, you'll tell us the curse itself was a gift." The accusation hung in the air like poison spreading through water. Mira felt Kale stiffen beside her, felt the sudden shift in the chamber's energy as the blood judges leaned back, their ancient eyes narrowing in calculation. This was the trap they'd been expecting. This was the moment where a lover's testimony would crumble under the weight of bias. But Mira realized, with sudden and stunning clarity, that he was right. She was in love with Kale, not because he was a king or because his blood ran with ancient power, not because he'd saved her life or carried the weight of centuries on his shoulders, but because he was someone who had suffered the exact same rejection she had, endured the exact same shame, and chose to transform it into compassion instead of cruelty. "Yes," she said, and the word echoed through the cavern like a gong struck by invisible hands. "Yes, I love him, not because I'm biased, but because I'm a Pathfinder, and I can see the truth beneath all the lies. I can see through the blood magic, through the illusions, through every justification we tell ourselves about power and hierarchy." She walked closer to the blood judges, and as she moved, her Pathfinder gift began to manifest visibly, a faint silver light surrounding her skin, the mark of her connection to truths that transcended the mortal realm. "Kale is strong," she continued, her voice gaining power, "stronger than any of you, because he carries both the beast and the human within himself, and he's mastered them both. He's kind without being weak. He's powerful without being cruel. Everything you fear in him is actually everything you should aspire to be. Everything this realm needs if it's going to survive." The blood judges stirred, and one of them, ancient beyond measure, with eyes like stars swallowing light, leaned forward on its throne. "Prove it," the Ancient One commanded, its voice like mountains grinding against each other. "Bring the test to the light. Let the Pathfinder's truth be weighed against the blood oath." Kyle stepped into the center of the chamber, and Mira held her breath. This was the moment. This was where he would either vindicate everything he'd claimed or confirm every doubt his brother had planted. But Kyle didn't transform fully into his beast form. That would have been the expected move. The king in his purest power, overwhelming his opponent through sheer supernatural strength. Instead, he stood half-shifted, the curse visible in its terrible entirety. His scarred eye, the claws that would never fully retract, his body caught between forms in a way that looked almost painful to witness. He was vulnerable, exposed. Everything his brother had designed him to be through the curse. "I'm not denying what I am," Kyle said, his voice ringing through the chamber with a clarity that silenced even the warrior's bloodlust. "I'm not running from the curse or the pain or the choices that brought me here. I'm standing in what I am, broken and whole at once, and I'm saying it's enough. I'm enough. And so is every soul my brother would erase in the name of purity." He looked directly at Mira, and in his gaze, she saw the full weight of his love, not the romantic ideal, but the real thing. The willingness to be judged, to be vulnerable, to let her see all of him. "This is what love is, brother," Kyle continued, his voice dropping lower but somehow carrying farther. "Not dominance, not conquest, not the need to crush everything that threatens your vision of perfection. Love is standing in front of the person who sees all of you, the beast and the man, the strength and the weakness, the scars and the healing, and choosing to stay, choosing to build something real instead of something pure." Kel's brother roared, a sound of pure fury and wounded pride, and his massive form transformed into pure predator. He charged across the arena toward Kale, his claws extending, his jaws opening to reveal fangs the length of daggers. But something shifted in the chamber. The ancestors in the stone seemed to lean closer, pressing their presence down like a physical weight. The blood judge's eyes began to glow with searing intensity, and Mira felt it, the moment when the court's judgment began to crystallize. Her Pathfinder gift flared outward like a star exploding, and suddenly, every lie, every justification, every cruelty masked as strength became visible as shadow truths in the chamber. The blood judges saw them, the warriors saw them, Kyle's brother saw them, saw himself. He crashed to his knees mid-charge, the weight of his own corruption finally manifest, finally undeniable. The power he'd built on fear, the throne he'd claimed through assassination, the lies he'd told himself about purity and supremacy, all of it laid bare in silver light. The ancient judge's voice echoed through the chamber, final and absolute. "The curse is lifted, the heir is deposed. Long live the Lycan king who had mercy." Spring came slowly to the northern mountains, arriving first as a whisper of warmer wind through the high passes, then as the gradual softening of the perpetual snow. The transformation was not violent or sudden, but patient and deliberate, the kind of change that alters the shape of everything without destroying what came before. 3 months had passed since the trial. Kale stood on the balcony of the refurbished throne room, watching the territories below come alive with new growth. His body was healing fully now that the curse had been broken, but he kept the scars, kept the half-shift form, kept the weight of what he'd survived visible on his skin as a permanent reminder of the cost of mercy and of the price paid by those who chose compassion over dominance. His left eye, scarred and clouded from the curse, remained that way by choice. He could have healed it with the right blood magic, but he didn't. It was a reminder, a monument to the year he'd spent trapped between forms, dying slowly in a cave until a broken human girl with a silver fang had saved him. Beside him, Mira looked out at the territories that were no longer divided by ancient grudges and fear. The old borders were dissolving. Communities that had been separated by centuries of Lycan supremacy were beginning to interact, to trade, to build relationships based on something other than hierarchy. Her father's leather jacket hung on a tapestry in the throne room behind them, no longer a relic of exile, but a symbol of the bridge between worlds they'd built together. She had worn it through the snow of their journey south, through the trials and the confrontation and the terrible moment when everything hung in balance. Now it belonged to history. "They want me to be pure," Mira said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. She was holding a scroll, sealed with the mark of the Pathfinder Council, and her fingers traced the edges nervously. "The other Pathfinders, they're saying I'm being corrupted by love, that I should remain separate from all hierarchies, that my gift is being diluted by attachment to the material world." Kyle turned to look at her fully. 3 months of stability had been good for her. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something quieter and more certain. The constant low-level fear that had lived in her shoulders since her exile had finally begun to ease. "What do you want?" he asked. It was the only question that mattered. Mira was quiet for a long moment, and Kale could see her weighing the choice, the pull of her Pathfinder nature against the pull of something deeper, the pull of belonging. "To stay here," she said finally, "with you. To help you rule in a way that doesn't require anyone to be thrown out or marked as defective. To build something where people like us, people who don't fit, people who are broken or different or wrong according to the old rules, can have a home." She turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw what no curse could ever destroy, a soul that had chosen him not despite his brokenness, but because of it. A person who understood, in the deepest part of herself, that wholeness was a lie, and that real strength came from accepting your wounds while refusing to let them define your limits. Kyle took her hand, his claws careful against her human skin. He had learned to move like this now, his dangerous weapons tempered by the weight of choice. "Then stay. Be queen. Not because you're a Pathfinder or because some ancient prophecy says you should be something extraordinary, but because you're Mira, and you chose to see worth in someone the world had written off as weak. That's the only qualification this realm needs." She touched the scar that ran down his face, the mark of the curse that was no longer a curse because he'd stopped seeing it as punishment and started seeing it as proof. "And you chose to stay broken rather than harden into cruelty. You could have become what your brother was. You could have used the power the curse gave you to dominate, to rule through fear. But you didn't." "We're quite a pair," he murmured, and she laughed, a sound that carried through the balcony and echoed back from the stone walls like hope made audible. "We're exactly what this world needs," she replied. In the courtyard below, the new laws were being read aloud by the town crier, carried on the spring wind to territories and villages and hidden communities that had never been acknowledged before. Equal standing for humans and Lycans in all matters of law and succession. Protection for those who don't fit the old hierarchies. Those born between worlds will not be cast out, but honored as bridges. Mercy will be the foundation of justice, not a sign of weakness. The strong will be measured not by their power to destroy, but by their wisdom to build. The silver fang that had once marked rejection, the fang Mira's father had made when she was born, not knowing she would become something the world had no name for, hung now above the throne in a place of honor. It was no longer a symbol of shame. It was no longer a prison or a brand or a curse. It was a reminder. In the lower territories, other broken creatures began to move toward the mountains. A Lycan who'd rejected his pack's call to war. A human girl who could hear the wolves singing. A child caught between two worlds, marked as defective and cast out. An old warrior who'd survived centuries and could no longer pretend that dominance was the same thing as honor. They came slowly at first, then in greater numbers, following stories that spread like wildfire through the long night. Stories carried on the wings of wolves and whispered by humans who dared to hope that their broken children might be valuable after all. The night before Mira's coronation as Queen of the Northern Territories, Kale took her back to the cave where they'd first found refuge. The snow had almost entirely melted, and the stone was warm to the touch from the spring sun. They stood in the entrance together, looking at the place where exile had become salvation. "I thought I'd die here," Mira said softly. "I was planning to." "I know," Kyle replied. He took her hand, and this time there was no hesitation in the gesture, no careful calculation of his claws against her fragile human skin. Just a king and a queen standing in the place where they'd learned to be broken together and discovered that was the same thing as being whole. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me," he answered. And in a small cave in the northern mountains, winter still lingered, but it was no longer the cold of exile or rejection or despair. It was the cold of home, the cold of belonging, the cold of a place where broken things were allowed to heal without pretending to be perfect, where a Lycan king and a human pathfinder could build a throne together, not as conquerors, but as witnesses to the truth that every soul the world had discarded was actually a cornerstone. The spring wind carried their laughter back down the mountains, and everywhere it touched, something shifted. Something began to hope. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.